The new Mantis X10 firearms performance system has all the goodness of the original, plus holster draw analysis and recoil analysis. It's a fantastic upgrade and I recommend it highly.
Hey guys, Brian Hill with the Complete Combatant again, and we're doing a dry fire lesson on how to best practice with a lot of different firearm systems that we have, a lot of different pistols. You've probably gone out, you've recently bought a new gun. It's very hard to know what to buy when you first start. You may have chosen it because you like the way it looked or the way it felt in your hand. And much like when you first start driving, your taste will develop over time. You'll want more out of your car, and you want the same thing out of your pistol. I'm not going to recommend a certain one for you to buy, but I'm going to tell you how to work with each one because each weapon gives us a different lesson. It has a subtlety to it. It has a different way to operate it, and we need to know how to do that. This is very ambitious to try to cover all these, but I'm going to give you some best practices for dry practice because some of you put in a comment the other day, you're not quite comfortable pressing a trigger in your house. And I think that's a good thing. You want to be safe. So I'm going to give you some safe ways to do it. Here's some gear that I use constantly in my classes and for dry practice. This is our Train Safe disabler, and what it basically does is it goes inside the barrel. Once it's inside the barrel, no bullets can ever get into the barrel. So it makes it essentially a non-functioning firearm. I've set one up for you guys already. And what you see is if you look in there, you can see the orange, which means we're safe. Right? And also, when I close it, I can see it sticking out the front. So there's no way this weapon could fire. In fact, I have to disassemble this weapon to be able to fire it after this. So that's a really safe way for me to practice. There are some other on the market you can simply press in there. Just remember, from my personal opinion, I think the more steps in between dry practice and being able to load the firearm and vice versa makes sure that I'm more safe. How many of you have left on the coffee pot? It only takes a second to not pay attention. Oftentimes we hear stories about people dry practicing, stepping away, and then coming back and picking the gun up. So this gives me another step to make sure I'm really safe with that. All right. It also gives the firing pin a nice soft surface to land against, and you get a little bit of feedback with it. So this is a good way to practice. That's our Train Safe disabler. Another thing that we like to use, this is from Bill Rogers. This is the tap rack train. This goes inside of a magazine, and it keeps the magazine from being able to lock open. So in most modern functioning firearms, when you have a magazine inserted in it, and that one's not going to lock open, what it'll do is every time you go to do that with a magazine in it, it's going to lock open. So if I have one set up like this one, and that's got the tap rack train in it already, when I put it in there, I can simply work the slide each time. It won't lock open. And that's a good thing to have. Once again, safety-wise, I can look in there and I see orange. So it's an excellent way to do it. It's a very good idea. I do have one caveat, one warning with you. If you work on a 1911 style firearm like this, and you use one of these, and it's locked open for reloads, do not run the slide forward. The 1911 specifically needs to pick up around to slow the function of the slide down, the velocity of the slide. If you do it with the tap rack trainer and insert and then go forward, as you just saw right there, the hammer will jump over and go forward because it's got too much in it. All right. If I do it with an actual training round like this, these are training rounds. You can buy plastic ones, you can buy metal ones. These are really nice. They have a little silicone back on them, so another safe place for the firing pin. But if I do the same activity with this 1911 now, lock it open here, and then I do a reload, and I release it, as you noticed, everything worked fine because it slows it down. That's part of the way the 1911 is set up. And we don't want it to be jumping over that and letting the hammer follow because that really will damage your gun over time. So it's something you need to know about the 1911, something to keep in mind. When I get done with it, simply rack the round out. Okay, it's a bit of I have to chase the rounds down, but it's a great way to practice, and they're a different color than anything else. So they simply don't make bullets that are completely red like this. All right, and that's a very safe round. I've been using these for years. It gets a little dinged up back here, and we have a little bit of silicone right there for the firing pin. So let's work our way through the centuries. There's a lot of stuff going on here. The oldest firearms are revolvers, okay? And they do some things very well in training for us, but we need to know how to practice with them. As I showed you in the first video, we want to put the cylinder out, We want to put it straight up and down, and we want to make sure nothing's in there. We want to visually verify that there's nothing in there. You have two ways that you can make this gun safe. One is, once again, a safety cap like this. I can put these in here, and I put 7. My gun holds 7 in here, and then I could see that there's a red round in there. All right, if you don't like to do that, they also make these. This is just a firing pin block. Okay, I put it over here. Now the cylinder is red. The firing pin can't get into it, and it's very safe for me to press the trigger over and over. It gives the firing pin something to do. The revolver teaches us two very important things. Number one is grip. We have to have an excellent grip with the revolver because it's different than a semi-automatic. Okay? We have to make sure that we get our hand high in the gun here and get our thumbs together. Now, when we press the trigger, it's called a double action trigger. That means it's actually cocking the hammer and then releasing it. And if you haven't worked with these before, they're very long and they're going to feel very heavy to you. You'll try to slow it down into stages, and that's the wrong way to go about it. This needs to be in constant motion. So once I begin to engage and pressing the trigger here, I want to keep the hammer moving like this. Okay, it's going to keep moving. I don't want to do this, get to right here and try to pause and then get a good shot. I'm going to clean up the sight movie. That's what Gabe White calls it. It's a great idea, instead of a sight picture, because it's in action. I'm always going to see it, so I'm cleaning up the sight picture. At the same time, I'm gently pressing here. Now, to you, it'll look like this. I'm just holding the gun, get a good grip, and I will gently press to the rear and keep it moving the whole time. And the feedback for me is, how much does that sight move? Okay, very easy for me to take that back out. It comes out, and now I can load the gun back up. Okay, so that's your revolver training. Work on your grip, keep that trigger moving. I think it's really a great way to practice being able to press a trigger consistently on the revolver. All right, you will have to practice reloading a revolver at some point if you go to the range to train. That's beyond the scope of this video, but reloading a revolver is significantly more different than a semi-automatic, so you want to get some good training. Lucky, Claude Warner, one of our good friends, the tactical professor, is probably one of the finest revolver instructors in the country. The other thing, it's hard to find instructors that actually do this. One of the reasons I have all these guns is I believe it's very important when you come to class, no matter what firearm you show up with, I should be competent and confident with it and be able to talk to you and help you. One thing I will say, that you should never carry as a firearm that doesn't work. If you have consistent malfunctions with it and you want to blame it on ammo or the gun, you have to fix that before you carry it. A gun should be almost unerringly reliable. We live in a modern age, the golden age of firearms. Guns are really very good now, but it has to function all the time. And I know you love your gun. All right, we get attached to it. But if it doesn't function, it's like a car that doesn't run. We need it to run all the time. The only way you're going to know is take it to the range and practice with it. So make sure you practice with it. Make sure it works. Now, some guns are particular about ammunition. The next one we're going to talk about, next historical leap, is the 1911. Named so because it was created then. It's a very old platform if you think about it. It has some things that it does very well, but I would consider it more of an expert's gun. All right. You need to understand the maintenance of the 1911. You need to understand how to tune it. You need to understand how the magazines work with the ammo. When it was originally made, Tom Givens has an excellent point on this, is hand labor was cheap and machine labor was expensive. So there are people that spent their life fitting these sort of guns, and they did a very good job at it. Now, most of the really good 1911s are going to cost you $3,000 or $4,000 to get into it. And as a new gun owner, that's a big thing. You can buy a much less expensive 1911, but you're not really knowing what you're getting into. And it takes a little bit of training to be good with these. Okay? Let's talk about it a little bit. The secrets of the 1911 is you have to have an excellent grip. Okay? This little speed bump right here is part of the grip safety. There's a lot of safeties inherent in a 1911. We have a thumb safety and a grip safety that we have to manipulate ourselves. What I see with a lot of shooters that have grip safeties, not just 1911s, but XDs, is if you don't get high and tight into the backstrap of the gun, you won't activate that grip safety. If I don't activate that grip safety, even though the safety's off here, nothing happens. It won't fire. All right. I could have my hand like this. If you guys see, it's not activating the grip safety, so I can't press the trigger. There's simply no way I can do that. So if you practice with a 1911, you're going to want to make sure that you get your hand as deeply as possible and get a very firm grip on that because you must depress that. The other thing is now you have a thumb safety to manipulate. So where does that happen? If I was in the holster and I'm coming out of the holster like this, I'm not going to manipulate that safety until the sights come onto the target and my grip is being developed, and now the thumb safety comes off and the finger comes to the trigger. Okay? Take the finger off the trigger. When I bring it back and I'm going to put it away, I'm going to work that thumb safety back up. That's why I think it's a little more of an expert's gun. There's a lot of steps in there that you've got to be very, very good at it. Listen, I love Harley Davidsons. I got one in the garage. It is not the cutting edge of motorcycle technology though. And it requires me to do what? Get in there and turn wrenches and take care of it. If that's your personality, this gun may fit you very well. But recognize, how much time do you have to practice? How much are you willing to put into this? It may look cool, but are you willing to put the time in it to make it an efficient firearm for you? Once you get them set, they're very good. If you look at this, this is a full-size 1911. All right. The base model of this gun is $1,500. It has hand-fitted parts in it. Somebody like myself had to hand fit. Most of the internal parts have been fitted. It only takes the world's best magazine because it's picky, and likes Wilson Elite Tactical magazines at $50 a magazine. So this is a very expensive gun to shoot. It's a .45, so it cost me a lot more to feed it too. So there's a lot of things going for it. It's very easy to grip. It's very pointable. It's very good trigger. But it's also very hard. You need to really understand this gun if you're going to use it. Let's talk about how you can manipulate this trigger in dry practice. This is called a single action, and it doesn't move very much. All right, safe direction, straight up right now. I'm just going to be touching that. That's how little that trigger moves. Okay, and what happens is as soon as I start dry practicing with this, the trigger still moves that much. So I could practice doing multiple shots by just simply pressing that and practicing that. What I want to do is just kind of let it reset each time and work my way back. Okay? You, of course, can each time run the slide and then work it again, but you get a little motion in there, so it's sufficient if I was going to do multiple targets behind me. Like if I was going to do El Presidente, draw and fire 6, reload 6, I would just have to keep touching that and then watch my sights. So I can dry practice with that. Really practice your draw. Make sure that you're getting that grip safety off and that you can manipulate the thumb safety appropriately. All right. The next system is a double action, single action. Okay? And that sounds really confusing, but what it really means is, like the Revolver, the first shot of this one, make sure it's clear, tap rack train. The first shot on this one will be double action. So that means it's going to cock the hammer, and I'm going to slowly press it straight back, and then it will fall forward. What changes after that is the slide will work, and now it will be a single action gun like the 1911. This system has a lot of good things about it, but once again, it's more difficult to operate because you have two distinct trigger presses. You have to be very good on the very first shot with a double action, so I want to practice that. Okay, but I also want to practice resetting to a single action, which is much easier. Most new gun buyers get one of these and then they simply shoot it all the time in single action. Okay, but if you're going to carry it, this gun is not safe in that position. There's very little to interfere with it. The 1911 had a grip safety and a thumb safety. Now, just the lightest touch on that trigger can make it go. So the gun is safe when it's decocked. And that's another step we have to worry about, is how to decock this gun. HK did a really good job. They put a thumb decocker right back there. My habituation is when I go to put a gun away, I put my thumb over the hammer. If I feel it in the wrong position, then I decock the gun and then I press it there. You've got to practice that. Number one thing I see in my classes with double action, single action is people put it back in the holster in single action only. The SIG is a great one for that. Okay, beautiful single action trigger. The decocker on it is on this side. So after I get done shooting every time, I need to practice that. That puts it back in double action mode. Then it's safe to go in the holster. In dry practice, this causes a great deal of problem for people because you have two different trigger pulls. That there's no way to create that unless you had something like a Cool Fire trainer, which is a CO2 cartridge barrel that works to slide back and forth. Then you would be fine. Significant investment for a beginner. So the way that we overcome the double action, single action trigger is when I press double action like this, I don't let the trigger all the way back out. I just work right here. It's not perfect. It's really not perfect, but it's better than nothing. So I can practice that shorter press. Okay. You want to practice a lot of double actions so that you get very good at it. You're going to have to be more visually patient as you press the trigger and really pay attention to the sights and clean it up. Remember what I said on a revolver, keep that moving. And then you're going to go to a single action. Number one bad point on this is not decocking it after it's been shot. It's very hard to remember that, so you've got to remember to decock it. Okay? Safety-wise, though, you'll know that you're about to press a shot off. Unlike the 1911, it has very little movement. Watch how far my finger is going to move. And then I'm going to see the hammer. So I have a lot of time on the double action, but at least an intermediate level gun, I think, more. And if you've bought one, you can work through it, but make sure you practice decocking it, the double action and the single action as much as you can, and you'll get a good practice out of it. All right. So now we moved into modern striker fire guns. Glock was the first one to come up with this. What that means is there's a spring in there with kind of a firing pin plunger in it. It just does that. And it's a very easy, repeatable trigger. You're doing some of the work with the trigger. It's got a little energy in it. So it's the same trigger press over and over again. The trigger can't be pressed unless that little tab right there is pressed down. No matter how hard I push on this, if that tab's not depressed, then the trigger can't be depressed. But of course, it's right where the trigger is. Here's the big deal with these. All right, when I have a striker fire gun like this with Glock, if I press the trigger straight to the rear, then I have nothing else to go. If you guys see, I put a little paster in there. Those are the things that we put up on shot targets to cover the holes. You could do it with a piece of tape. What that allows me to do with a Glock, it's not the same, but it's closer as I can do this with the trigger. Okay. There we go. Lock it open. So I get just a little bit of motion in there with that, but not much. All right. And I think this one may have been sitting there too long. It's kind of getting eat up right here. Good. Pull it out of there. So one of the problems with the Glock is when you press this, you can't really work it again. The trigger's to the rear. You have to run the slide each time. All right. You can simply imagine and watch the front sight, but it's not the same. And the paster will work for a little while, but just sitting here getting ready for the video has already taken enough energy out of it. So I'm going to fold it in half and see if I can get it set up for you guys. There we go. So now I have a dead trigger. It doesn't click each time, but it still moves. Okay, it's not a perfect solution. It's not like your trigger, but it's better than nothing. You still have some movement. So if I'm working on a target here, what I can do is always look at the front sight and then manipulate the trigger, and that's going to feed back from me each time. Now I'm just watching that sight. There's no recoil, so I'm watching that. So that's a little paster trick. The other thing you can do is get something that's like this. This is a SIRT pistol. Okay, and what it allows to do is you have a trigger that resets each time. This is a non-firing firearm. It just has lasers in it, but it is made like a Glock. If you like Glocks, you got the most advantages because holsters are easy to find. There's a lot of training aids with it. This is just like this Glock here, but the trigger's still not quite the same as a Glock trigger, but it's good practice. Now, I don't personally carry a Glock. I'm carrying HKs, but what I use this gun for in my dry practice is sprinting. All right, when I want to practice how quickly can I manipulate a trigger here, I'm going to do this one-handed so you can see. See, I can practice that. I don't have to run the slide each time. And for people that are working on what we call controlled pairs, 2 shots, all right, how quickly can I do that? And then I get a little bit of a laser that shows me how that works. So that's a great training aid for me. Okay. All these guns, as you can see, are compromises. There's advantages and disadvantages. I think the firearms instructor community needs to be able to teach each one of these and be able to communicate with you whatever your choice is. Much like holsters, you're going to change your mind. You're going to buy a different gun eventually. You're going to be able to do it. My HK is a race gun because I run guns like a race car. Right? It has extra accessories on it. It's set up to go really, really fast, and it has everything that I need in it because I run it really hard. But on a daily basis, I drive not a race car, but a pickup truck. All right? And it gets me to where I'm going. When you first start, you got to figure out what you like, and it's going to take you a while to do that. Let's talk about the most important thing here is gun fitment. If your finger can't get to the trigger easily, you have a problem. Now, I'm really lucky. God gifted me. I have very good eyesight and I have really big hands. Okay. And then through my career of martial arts and submission grappling, I've been holding on to people my whole life, and my grip is really strong. So that makes it easy to be a really good shooter. But that may not be the case for you. You may find that you can just barely touch the edge of that trigger. So what do you have to do? You have to find a gun that fits you and that you can practice with. Dry practice will give you the ability to do all the manipulations, we call it administrative techniques of the firearm, at a competent level. All right, from picking it up off the table to taking the magazine out and loading it, to working the slide, to clearing a malfunction. That's all a part of your dry practice. What I've talked today a lot about is trigger manipulation. How do we manipulate the trigger with different systems? There's not one in here that's a perfect one. All right, we have to practice over and over with what is suboptimal sometimes, not enough trigger motion. But remember, in dry practice, you can't simulate recoil because there's not a round being fired. So really watch the front sight and then think about how your trigger finger is moving, and then get good at all the other things. Can you draw the firearm? Practice the draw over and over. Can I put a magazine in, or with the revolver, can I reload it? All right. With the single action, am I getting a good grip on that 1911? Am I depressing that grip safety? And is my thumb working the safety each time? You'll see guns with safeties on them when we get a bit under pressure, not just shooting into range, but if you go to a class or you compete, you'll see a bit of pressure and people will simply forget to activate that safety and take it off. And then you'll see them push real hard. We call it the rule of threes. It takes 3 times. So push, nothing happens. They push harder, and then they start to get curious why the gun's not working. Like, oh, I didn't take the safety off. Whatever gun you pick, practice with it. Practice with it a lot. If you've run out and bought a new gun and it's with the gun you have, that's the one you practice with. Get good with what you have. The only thing I wouldn't tolerate is a gun that malfunctions. So you need to shoot an acceptable number of rounds. For us advanced shooters, we say 1,000 rounds with one malfunction. Well, most people don't shoot that much. So at least get 200 rounds through the gun and make sure it works well with your chosen ammo. And I would shoot at least a box full of defensive rounds. The 1911 is notorious for not being able to accept hollow points because it drives up and gets caught. So make sure you shoot also your self-defense rounds and your practice rounds. The final thing I want to show you guys is, we'll get into this. This is the Mantis X, and it's got a little Picatinny rail, and it glues onto the bottom of my magazine. So I can do draw analysis, I can do everything and come right out of the holster with it. I don't have to change my holster. This is a very useful product for you guys to be. You can check your trigger pressure. You can check how the gun's moving, how it's pointing in direction. You can analyze your draw. It's helpful. All these things are helpful, but really all I need is one of these. They're not very expensive. This will give you the safest practice you ever can. You can set your gun up in an incredibly safe way. With this, you can lock it open and see. And anybody were to enter the room, they see the orange sticking out the other end too. So even visually, we can verify it. Put one of these in your magazine so your magazine constantly works. And then practice with that firearm. Don't be afraid to experiment and change. If you've bought a gun and it doesn't fit you, it's okay. If the holster doesn't work, get another one. We're going to have a bit of investment in this, and don't get caught up in the gear. You're going to find some of us love certain things. That doesn't mean you have to love it, but you need to value people's opinion. My opinion comes from this. I teach 15, 20 people at a time on the range. They shoot 1,000 rounds, do it several times a month. So every year I see 500,000 to 1 million rounds going down ranges. And I see patterns in this. I got to tell you right now, I see the largest variety of guns on the range, and I see almost all of them work very well, as long as you stay with the manufacturers that are putting out good firearms. But we all have a choice, and it has to be different. If you have small hands, okay, if you have poor eyesight, if a gun doesn't fit you, you have to figure out how that works and get a good gun that works with you. And you'll be able to practice at home. You can practice that trigger press, you can practice what you're seeing through the sights, because those things are always connected. I hope this video helps you new gun owners. There's no way I could do this real in-depth. I've just covered the highlights. I probably missed some things. I'm sorry if I did. If you have some questions, please reach out to me. Some of you had some great questions last time. This is an answer. One gentleman said, I just can't press the trigger at home. So I've given you some options. Hopefully it doesn't. If you can't use a real gun, get one of these. All right, you can order them. Cert pistols are fantastic. You can practice at home. But you've got to practice, because if you carry a firearm, you're responsible for every round that you shoot. in self-defense, and you have to be somewhat competent with it and understand how it works. So let's get some free practice at home. Also, one of you said I should wear an ass shirt, so I covered that for you. So you should be happy. I'll try to respond to any questions you have. You can help us. You can ask me a question directly anytime at thecompletecombatant.com. We're all over Facebook, all the social media, and we can help you with that. We have a YouTube channel with more videos on it. So I'm there for you. I'm really excited you're taking this journey with us. I'm so grateful to ask to give me this platform and this chance to talk to you. And I look forward to seeing you new gun owners on the range at some point. Be safe.